What's up, Night Owls? And welcome to another segment of the Nocturnal Mind YouTube channel. I should really come up with an actual name for this. Now, for anyone still unaware of who we are and what we do, here's a little link for you right there. And without any further ado, let's get started. Does anyone remember EFX? So back in the 1970s, the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Nevada, made its debut as one of the largest and most extravagant hotels in the world. And it was only fitting that eventually they would want to host an equally extravagant theatrical production within its walls. And that's where EFX came in, with a story created by Gary Goddard and Tony Christopher. EFX was revolutionary in its time for being almost completely automated, including spectacular special effects such as $2 million each fire-breathing dragons, a giant spaceship landing at one point during the story, 3D imagery, and various platforms and cables waving actors and actresses around several feet above the stage. For the time, it was the most expensive and largest scaled theater installation in the world, with MGM's original theater being completely demolished and rebuilt from scratch for the purpose of this show. Now, talking about dragons and spaceships within the context of one show, you're probably wondering what the hell it's about. Well, much like the theatrical version of Cats, a performance of EFX didn't exactly have a coherent storyline. While Cats was more of a celebration of the music and the dance, EFX was more of a celebration of, well, the effects. But its creators also meant for it to be a celebration of the human mind and imagination, which, I'm totally down for. What there was of a story had audiences following this grand, all-powerful overseer known as the effects master. And over the course of the performance, the effects master would take you on a journey from one time and place to another, and teach lessons of hope and imagination, and the power of belief along the way. Some times and places audiences would experience included the early days of King Arthur and Merlin, a futuristic circus run by a sci-fi P.T. Barnum, a seance performed by the wife of Harry Houdini, and finally a glimpse of a dark future as told by the science fiction author H.G. Wells. And throughout the performance, the effects master would assume the roles of each iconic character from each setting. In other words, the effects master would appear as Merlin, Houdini, Barnum, and Wells. And when the show was just in the early stages of production, the creators knew even then that they would want a Broadway face to start off the show. And that was when Michael Crawford, made famous by his portrayal of the Phantom in The Phantom of the Opera, came on the scene. Now, again, the show was almost completely automated, which meant a lot of moving scenery, flashing lights, and pyrotechnics amid all the acrobatics and stunts, of which Crawford was apparently intent on doing, for the most part, by himself. And this eventually led to a couple of pretty severe injuries. In fact, Crawford was even lit on fire at one point during the fighting dragons scene. So after a couple years, Crawford stepped down from the role of effects master, which made him the first in a line of effects masters that would come and go, each within a span of about 1 or 2 years. And with each replacement of their lead actor, the story also changed. Now, the next actor to take up the role of effects master was none other than David Cassidy of Partridge Family fame. I think I love you, so what am I so afraid of? And by the time he came on the scene, he asked for more creative control over the project, and ended up adding in some new songs, scrapping some old ones, and overall giving the show a more coherent storyline. In this instance, Cassidy portrayed a disillusioned waiter working at the MGM, who had lost the love of his life and needed to learn how to believe again. And so he, of course, gets swept up and taken on a journey throughout time and space, still keeping closely in tune with the original, visiting the lands of King Arthur and the grim future of H.G. Wells. Only this time, a woman from the audience would be chosen at the beginning of each show to participate and play the role of Cassidy's long-lost love, who he would eventually save at the end of the show. But eventually, Cassidy left the show as well, and he was afterward replaced by Tommy Tune. And again, the story was changed in order to accommodate Tommy Tune's talent for dancing. And from what I have seen, this is where much of the original story got a little lost. Now, when Tommy Tune left the show, a lot of the original content was actually brought back with the arrival of Rick Springfield as the new effects master. I emphasize because I have a tendency to mix up Rick Springfield with Bruce Springsteen. Hey, in my defense, their names are pretty similar. You got the one-syllable name, Rick, Bruce, and then you have a two-syllable name that begins with Spring. Springfield. Springsteen. Rick Springfield. Make a note of that. Rick Springfield is not Bruce Springsteen. But again, this time around, a lot of Rick Springfield's own songs were added to the show, and some of the older ones were scrapped. But it still included him as the effects master, portraying Merlin, P.T. Barnum, Houdini, and Wells. And before they take it down, you can actually find the full Rick Springfield performance from their very last night on YouTube. And it's actually pretty fun. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing at the time, but I was able to skim through it. And again, a lot of those original elements are still there, including that kind of basic message to believe in magic. And Rick Springfield is kind of dreamy, especially in those tight leather pants. The show finally closed in 2002 with the exit of Rick Springfield. Yeah. And the MGM Theater was later set up to host a show from Cirque du Soleil. And it seems like EFX just kind of faded out of time. There's not really a whole lot of information available on it. In fact, most of my facts came from Wikipedia, so I use the term facts loosely. But if you really search around, there are a couple backstage videos with Michael Crawford, and even a few snippets of the David Cassidy performance, and even a full Tommy Tune rehearsal on YouTube, last I checked. And again, you can also see the final performance with Rick Springfield. And while I know there are people out there who know it existed, it really wasn't that long ago. I feel like for as grand a scale as this show supposedly was, it's not spoken of. It's not referenced anywhere, doesn't appear on any top 10 lists. And maybe it wasn't big because it didn't have an exact storyline. But you could say the same thing about Cats. And Cats is still a pretty beloved show. Or, you know, at least until they made the movie. I actually know FX because I grew up with it. Not the actual show itself. I unfortunately never got a chance to see it. I was way too young at the time. I was about 2 when it started, and about 9 when it ended. And I never even went to Vegas until I was about 12, so. But my grandparents were fortunate enough to have seen it, and they actually bought my family a cassette of the soundtrack. See, it's this little rectangular thing that you insert into a machine and it plays music. And my family would often listen to the soundtrack on car trips, and even sometimes just home on a lazy day. And eventually, when I got older, I graduated to the CD, and it's the original soundtrack with Michael Crawford. From what I hear, a lot of the other effects masters, their original recordings had to be bought specifically from the MGM store. And as far as I know, they're not still available today. But the Crawford one still should be if you look for it. And I still listen to the music all the time. Occasionally you'll catch me singing some of the songs, like Tonight or The Magic That Surrounds You. But, like, literally no one else I know outside of my family has even heard of EFX. And again, for something that was on so grand a scale, I find that kind of a shame. And in this not so glorious age of reboots and sequels and prequels and just completely unimaginative rehashes of the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you'd think that we could at least get a revival of EFX, because that's something I actually want to see. So if you haven't done so already, I urge you to check it out, if you can. Again, there are some snippets of the show in all its various forms on YouTube for now. And as far as I know, the Crawford track is still available. If you're the kind of person, like me, who could just enjoy a simple escape into a fantasy world that's full of beautiful music, extravagant effects, and just a message of keeping hold on a belief in magic, then go check out EFX. And maybe, if enough people want to see it again, we can bring this show back to life. Thanks for joining me today. For more thoughts and tips on stories and storytelling, you can check out our website at nocturnalmind.net. And for those of you waiting on our next Amnesia Challenge video, we apologize. It's been a busy few weekends for us, and we just haven't been able to put another one together just yet. But they're coming, we promise. This is Kaylee, signing off, and we'll see you next time.